India is experiencing an unprecedented historical moment in its economic trajectory, and this year, 2026, marks a definitive turning point in the global landscape of economic power and technological influence. The country of over 1,400,000,000 people is no longer just a promising emerging economy, but rather a consolidated powerhouse that is redefining the rules of the game in the world market. While traditional economies face deceleration and population aging, India accelerates at full force, driven by a unique combination of demographic, technological, and structural reform factors that create a perfect environment for sustainable growth in the coming decades. Economic projections for India in 2026 are simply impressive and challenge the expectations even of the most optimistic analysts. The International Monetary Fund has revised its estimates for Indian GDP growth to an impressive 6.4% in 2026, while the Reserve Bank of India projects 7.3%, and the Asian Development Bank forecasts growth between 6.5% and 7.2%. These numbers become even more significant when we compare them with global averages of around 3%, and with developed economies that struggle to reach 2% annual growth. What we are witnessing is not a temporary spike, but a structural transformation that positions India as the fastest-growing major economy on the planet for the foreseeable future. The demographic advantage that India possesses is perhaps its greatest strategic asset in this economic race. With a median age of just 28 years, India has the youngest population among all major economies, while China faces rapid aging and Europe and Japan struggle with shrinking workforces. Every month, approximately 1 million young Indians enter the labor market, bringing energy, innovation, and consumption power that fuel economic expansion in multiple sectors simultaneously. This demographic dividend is not just about numbers, but about the quality and education level of this workforce that increasingly includes engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and skilled professionals ready to compete globally. The digital revolution in India has been nothing short of extraordinary and represents one of the most successful technology adoption cases in modern economic history. The Unified Payments Interface known as UPI has transformed India into the global leader in digital transactions, processing over 100 billion transactions annually worth trillions of dollars. This digital infrastructure created by the government has democratized financial access, allowing even street vendors in remote villages to accept digital payments instantly and at virtually zero cost. The implications of this digital foundation extend far beyond payments, creating an ecosystem where fintech, healthtech, edtech, and e-commerce startups can scale rapidly, reaching hundreds of millions of users. The Indian startup ecosystem has matured dramatically and now ranks as the third largest in the world, behind only the United States and China. In 2025 alone, India added over 50 new unicorns, bringing the total to well over 150 companies, valued at more than $1 billion each. These are not just copycats of Western models, but innovative solutions designed for Indian problems that often prove scalable. Two other emerging markets facing similar challenges. From digital lending platforms serving the unbanked to agricultural technology, helping millions of small farmers optimize yields, the Indian startup scene demonstrates remarkable innovation capacity that attracts billions in venture capital from global investors seeking the next big opportunity. Manufacturing is experiencing a renaissance in India, driven by deliberate policy initiatives and global supply chain restructuring. The production-linked incentive schemes launched by the government have catalyzed over $250 billion in manufacturing investments across strategic sectors, including electronics, semiconductors, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and defense equipment. Major global corporations, from Apple to Samsung, from Tesla to Boeing, are either expanding existing operations or establishing new manufacturing facilities in India to tap into the vast domestic market and use the country as an export hub. The vision of making India a manufacturing powerhouse is no longer aspirational, but increasingly real as the country climbs global competitiveness rankings. The infrastructure revolution underway in India is perhaps the most visible sign of the country's transformation and commitment to long-term economic growth. the government has invested over $1.4 trillion in infrastructure development over the past 5 years, building highways, airports, metro systems, ports, and renewable energy installations at a pace that rivals China's infrastructure boom of the previous decade. New expressways connect major economic centers, reducing logistics costs and travel times dramatically, while new airports in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities open up previously isolated regions to commerce and tourism. This infrastructure backbone is essential for India to realize its economic potential by reducing friction in the movement of goods, people, and information across its vast geography. India's services sector continues to be a crown jewel of the economy and has evolved far beyond the traditional call center stereotype that once defined Indian services exports. The country now dominates global IT services, business process management, engineering services, and increasingly sophisticated knowledge work, including research and development for multinational corporations. Indian IT giants like TCS, Infosys, and Wipro employ hundreds of thousands of engineers serving Fortune 500 clients worldwide, while newer players in cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity are carving out significant global market share. The services sector contributes over 55% of India's GDP and continues to grow robustly, creating millions of high-paying jobs that fuel middle-class expansion. The rise of the Indian middle class represents one of the most significant consumer market developments in modern economic history. Estimates suggest that over 400 million Indians now belong to the middle class with purchasing power and consumption patterns similar to middle-class consumers in developed economies. This massive consumer base creates enormous opportunities across all sectors, from automobiles to smartphones, from fashion to entertainment, from travel to financial services. Global brands recognize that success in India is no longer optional but essential for growth, as the Indian market alone can determine the viability of products and business models. The shift from a saving-oriented society to a consumption-driven economy is accelerating, with young Indians showing willingness to spend and borrow for lifestyle upgrades. Education and skill development have become national priorities as India recognizes that human capital will ultimately determine its competitive position in the global economy. The country produces over 1.5 million engineering graduates annually, more than any other nation, and has significantly expanded capacity in medical education, management studies, and vocational training. New education policies emphasize critical thinking, creativity, and digital literacy, moving away from rote learning that characterized the previous system. The proliferation of EdTech platforms has democratized access to quality education, allowing students in remote areas to learn from top instructors and access resources that were previously available only in elite urban institutions. This investment in human capital is creating a virtuous cycle where better educated workers drive innovation, which creates higher value jobs that attract more investment. The renewable energy transition in India is happening at remarkable speed, driven by both climate commitments and economic pragmatism. India has become the third largest solar power market globally and aims to achieve 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. The cost of solar power has fallen so dramatically that it is now cheaper than coal-based electricity, making the economic case for renewables compelling even without environmental considerations. This energy transition creates enormous opportunities in manufacturing of solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, and grid infrastructure, while reducing India's dependence on imported fossil fuels. Foreign investors see India's renewable sector as a massive opportunity, with billions flowing into solar, wind, and green hydrogen projects. Financial sector reforms have transformed the Indian banking and financial system, making it more robust, efficient, and inclusive than ever before. The implementation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has improved credit discipline, while the integration of banking with digital identity through Aadhaar has enabled direct benefit transfers that reduce corruption and leakage. India's fintech revolution has created alternatives to traditional banking with digital lenders, payment platforms, investment apps, and insurance tech companies serving segments that formal banking struggled to reach. The formalization of the economy, accelerated by GST implementation and digital payments, has expanded the tax base and improved government finances, creating fiscal space for development spending. India's pharmaceutical and healthcare sector has emerged as a global powerhouse, earning the country recognition as the pharmacy of the world. Indian companies manufacture over 60% of global vaccines and supply affordable generic medicines to over 200 countries, making healthcare accessible to billions of people who otherwise could not afford treatment. The COVID pandemic demonstrated India's pharmaceutical capabilities as the country not only managed its domestic vaccination program but also exported hundreds of millions of vaccine doses to other nations. Medical tourism is booming, with hundreds of thousands of international patients traveling to India for high-quality healthcare at a fraction of Western costs. The combination of skilled doctors, advanced hospitals, and cost competitiveness positions Indian healthcare as a major economic sector with significant growth potential. The space program and technology ambitions of India have captured global attention, demonstrating the country's growing technological sophistication. The successful Chandrayaan missions to the Moon and the Mars orbiter mission, accomplished at a fraction of NASA's costs, showcase Indian engineering excellence and frugal innovation. The opening of the space sector to private companies has unleashed entrepreneurial energy, with startups developing satellites, launch vehicles, and space applications. India's prowess in software, artificial intelligence, and data science is being leveraged for everything from precision agriculture to smart cities, from healthcare diagnostics to financial fraud detection. The country is positioning itself as a technology leader, not just in services, but in cutting-edge research and development. Agriculture remains central to the Indian economy, employing nearly half the workforce, and the sector is undergoing a technology-driven transformation. Precision farming techniques, drip irrigation systems, drone surveillance, and AI-powered crop advisory services are helping farmers increase yields, reduce input costs, and adapt to climate variability. Agricultural startups are tackling every aspect of the farming value chain, from soil testing to market linkages, from credit access to crop insurance. The government's focus on doubling farmer incomes has driven policy reforms and investments in rural infrastructure that are modernizing agriculture and improving rural livelihoods. As agriculture becomes more productive and remunerative, it frees up labor for manufacturing and services, while ensuring food security for the massive population. Urban transformation is India's economic geography. As cities expand and new urban centers emerge across the country, mega cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore continue to grow, but Tier 2 cities like Pune, Ahmedabad, and Kochi are becoming economic powerhouses in their own right, attracting investments and talent. The government's Smart Cities mission aims to create 100 cities with world-class infrastructure, digital connectivity, and quality of life. Urbanization drives demand for housing, transportation, retail, entertainment, and services, creating economic opportunities across multiple sectors. The challenge of managing this urban growth sustainably while providing affordable housing, clean water, sanitation, and mobility solutions is enormous, but also represents investment opportunities worth hundreds of billions of dollars. India's relations with the global economy have evolved significantly as the country embraces strategic partnerships while maintaining policy autonomy. Free trade agreements with UAE, Australia, and ongoing negotiations with UK and EU are opening new markets for Indian goods and services. At the same time, India is selective about market access, protecting strategic sectors while encouraging competition in areas where domestic industry is strong. The country's presidency of the G20 in 2023 showcased its growing diplomatic heft and thought leadership on global issues, from climate finance to digital public infrastructure. As geopolitical tensions reshape global supply chains, many countries see India as a stable, democratic alternative to over-reliance on any single nation for critical supplies. The challenges facing India's economic rise are substantial, and acknowledging them is essential for realistic assessment of the country's trajectory. Infrastructure gaps remain despite massive investments, with bottlenecks in ports, logistics, and urban infrastructure constraining growth potential. Educational quality varies enormously, with elite institutions producing world-class talent, while much of the education system struggles with inadequate resources and outdated curricula. Regulatory complexity and bureaucratic hurdles still frustrate businesses despite reform efforts. Income inequality is rising with the benefits of growth. not distributed evenly across regions, classes, and communities. Environmental degradation, including air pollution, water scarcity, and climate impacts, threatens sustainability of growth. Addressing these challenges requires sustained policy focus, governance improvements, and inclusive development strategies. The comparison between India and China is inevitable and illuminating, as both Asian giants pursue economic development with different models and at different stages. China's economy is approximately 5 times larger than India's, and its per capita income is significantly higher, reflecting 3 decades of earlier reform and opening up. However, China faces demographic decline, rising labor costs, and increasing geopolitical tensions that are driving companies to diversify supply chains. India's advantages include a younger population, democratic institutions, English language proficiency, and stronger rule of law. Many analysts predict that India's growth will outpace China's in the coming decades, as demographic and political factors play out. Rather than viewing this as competition, India and China can be complementary, with different strengths serving different market needs. Foreign direct investment flows into India have reached record levels as global investors seek exposure to the country's growth story and diversify away from concentrated positions. In recent years, India has attracted over $80 billion annually in FDI across sectors from technology to manufacturing, from retail to financial services. Sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and private equity firms are allocating significant capital to Indian assets, betting on long-term returns from the country's development. The government has liberalized FDI norms in most sectors, allowing majority foreign ownership and simplified approval processes. This capital inflow not only provides financing for development, but brings technology management expertise and global market access that accelerate India's economic transformation. The entrepreneurial energy in India is palpable as millions of young Indians start businesses, ranging from small enterprises to high-growth startups. Government initiatives like Startup India and schemes supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises provide ecosystem support, including funding, mentorship, regulatory relief, and market access. The stigma of business failure has diminished as society recognizes that entrepreneurship involves risk-taking and iteration. Access to capital has improved dramatically with angel investors, venture capital funds, and now public markets through IPOs providing funding at various stages. This entrepreneurial boom is creating jobs, driving innovation, and building globally competitive companies that put India on the world business map. Regional diversity within India presents both challenges and opportunities as different states pursue varied development strategies with different results. States like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu have emerged as economic leaders with business-friendly policies, strong infrastructure, and skilled workforces, attracting the lion's share of investments. Other states, particularly in the eastern and northeastern regions, lag behind in development indicators and struggle to attract investments despite natural resources and strategic location. The federal structure allows for policy experimentation as states compete to attract investments and improve ease of doing business. Successful models in one state can be replicated elsewhere, while poorly designed policies serve as cautionary examples. Reducing regional disparities is essential for inclusive growth and requires sustained focus on improving governance and infrastructure in lagging regions. India's soft power and cultural exports have grown, significantly enhancing the country's global image and creating economic opportunities. Bollywood films find audiences across Asia, Africa, and increasingly in Western markets, generating substantial revenues and cultural influence. Indian cuisine has become mainstream globally, with restaurants in every major city and food products in supermarkets worldwide. Yoga and Ayurveda represent Indian wellness traditions that millions practice globally, creating business opportunities in training, certification, products, and services. The global Indian diaspora, numbering over 30 million, includes successful entrepreneurs, professionals, and politicians who serve as bridges for trade, investment, and cultural exchange. This soft power complements economic rise by creating familiarity, trust, and connections that facilitate business relationships, Climate change poses existential risks to India given its large population dependent on agriculture in coastal areas vulnerable to sea level rise. The country has committed to ambitious climate targets, including reaching net zero emissions by 2070 and generating half its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. Balancing economic development with environmental sustainability is perhaps the defining challenge as India seeks to lift hundreds of millions out of poverty while reducing carbon intensity. Investments in clean energy, green hydrogen, electric mobility, and sustainable agriculture are essential, not just for environmental reasons, but for energy, security, and economic competitiveness. Climate adaptation, including water management, urban planning, and agricultural practices, must be prioritized to build resilience against inevitable climate impacts. The future trajectory of India's economy over the next 2 decades could reshape global economic geography more profoundly than any development since China's rise. Projections suggest that India could become the world's third largest economy by 2030, surpassing Japan and Germany and potentially challenge for second place behind the United States by 2050. This is not preordained and depends on sustained policy reforms, infrastructure investments, skill development, and inclusive growth strategies. If India gets this right, the implications are enormous, not just for Indians but for the global economy as hundreds of millions of consumers enter the global middle class, creating demand that drives growth worldwide. India's rise is one of the most important economic stories of the 21st century, and understanding this transformation is essential for anyone seeking to comprehend the future of the global economy.